Well, it's been an interesting few days now, hasn't it? While people are transfixed on the collapse of the condominiums, the high rise in Surfside, Florida, previous to that, you had the collapse of a bridge in DC over a road, a highway. Both have interesting symbolic meaning when you look at it from the context of symbolism and metaphor. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, let's take Surfside, for example. Surfside, long before the collapse of the building, residents in the building were warning management that there were problems with the building. They were warning that there were issues with it, and I'm sure there were microfractures in the foundation, that the building itself, having been built on the seashore on sand, was beginning to sink in certain areas. There were issues with the building that were ignored. The warnings were ignored. The pleas were ignored. Until the building had structural integrity failure. And 2/3 of the building collapsed. A lot of people are dead. Final numbers, people don't really know yet. But what does this have to do with anything other than the terrible tragedy itself? Well, it is in part symbolic. It is symbolic for what happens when warnings go unheeded, pleas go ignored, and when the consequences ensue, it leads to a greater tragedy, a bigger problem. Now look at this from a metaphor of nation states. How many times have you heard, don't build your house upon the sand? From a metaphorical standpoint. Also, I want you to consider the symbolic metaphor, right? The symbolic meaning of a bridge. A bridge bridges two sides. If there's no bridge for people to meet in the middle, right? To bridge the differences, the gaps, well, that poses a significant problem. So without a bridge connecting opposing sides, or sides on either side, right? 2 points. People can't cross. There's no way to bridge the gap. Think about the language sets we use. Bridging the gap, gap fill. So if a bridge gets blown out, gets damaged, collapses for whatever reason, think about that from a metaphorical standpoint. In terms of nation states, in terms of rulership, governance, in terms of division in a nation state and how it impacts the nation state and paralyzes it. Now think about the two examples I've given you. The collapse of the condominium, the high-rise in Surfside, and the collapse of a bridge spanning two sides, right, in Washington, D.C. And now I want you to think about how both of those represent what we're dealing with in the United States right now and beyond. Perhaps in your own nation states, in the world around you, between people groups. That's what I mean when I talk about the binary simulacrum and the lack of an authentic true middle and authentic servant leadership in the middle to lead people through the chaos and confusion of crisis. What you have in this country is the lack of an authentic true middle. You have the counterfeits of it, but you don't have the authentic thing. Likewise, without an overarching meta-narrative that brings people together, that empowers them, that equips them, that inspires them, right? And then enables them to play a role in their nation, what you've created is exponential vulnerabilities and entropy, which ultimately leads to increased division and ultimately collapse. You can spend $1 trillion every year on your military, on hardware, on plans, programs, policies, and what have you. But the best intents will yield nothing if it's from the binarium or from a false middle that's keeping an authentic one down. And hear what I'm telling you. I'm telling you how your system is screwed up, how it's being run, and why it is you have fear and confusion throughout it. Fear and confusion are ID points, are warning flags to you that you're in a greater predicament than it might seem. And when fear and confusion rules, it only leads to greater division and chaos and distrust, fueling more fear and confusion. This is your predicament in the public sector, the private sector, and in the citizenry. Now, it's true that your enemies have played a big role in this. It's also true that you've played a big role in it yourselves because of your own pride, greed, avarice, and hubris, which is continuing, right, to make matters worse because you refuse to let go and let the authentic rise up, because you are ruled by fear. If that were to be the case, that a true middle were to rise up, you would lose power and be exposed. But here's the irony of your predicament. The more that you try to control and hold on to it, the more that you're being exposed in it. So you're in a zero-sum game. And what you're doing is you're leading the nation to structural integrity problems that will eventually lead to a collapse. And thinking that you know more than you actually know, and thinking that your power, position, your wealth, your influence is sufficient enough in your own wisdom and works to get yourself out of your predicament, you're actually creating a worse one. It's backfiring on you. And worse yet, you've marginalized, made enemies out of, scapegoated entire groups of people who you need to actually turn things around, even for your own corrupted interests. We must be honest here. The ruling class globally is corrupted. They've created the conditions that are now turning around and enslaving them to their ultimate fate, which is by their own hand through pride, and creating conditions that will only worsen as long as they continue to control, continue to scapegoat, continue to try to fig leaf their own insufficiencies, their own mistakes, their own biases, and their own corruption. You're faced with an exponential law of diminishing returns. And that's not just here in the United States, that's globally. And that's not just the United States, it's the entire world and all the nation states. So what happens when you choose your pride and your denial and desire to control, and you're exposing yourself, is that you exponentially increase the consequences the longer that you hold on to it. So not only are you exposing yourselves, you're actually exponentially increasing the punitive consequences that have to be rendered upon you by refusing to admit you have a problem. As I said in my last talk, that is an addiction cycle. When you pretend that you're not in a war that's being waged against you and against the people, you're complicit with the war being waged against them. That makes you a hostile proxy for those enemy forces. Even if that's not what you want. And why do you do that? Well, it is a consequence of pride, fear, confusion, and a refusal to accept responsibility for your predicament, while demanding more and more control to try to fig leaf over your insufficiencies, your fears, your corruption, and your inability to extract yourself from the trap that you are in. That's what it means when we say there is a way which seems right unto people, but its end is the broad path which leads to destruction. There's a reason why it is we say that pride comes before the fall. There is a reason why it is that we continue to warn you and reach out and offer you a pathway out of your predicament. There is a reason why it is that you have a convergence of stuff coming together at this point in time that you will not be able to overcome doing it the way you've always done it, or going back in time and running your old playbooks. You will only ensure worse consequences, more destructive consequences, and more hardship and suffering for everybody. In a sense, what you have done is you've built your kingdom upon the sand. Just like at Surfside, that condominium. And worse yet, you've not just built it upon the sand, you've put in insufficient foundations from which you are making your decisions from. Thereby destabilizing your position, your ability to actually act to do what is necessary, not only for your own selfish interest, but for the better path, which is the greater good of the country and the nation states that are your allies. And playing the hyper-partisanship card and thinking that you can continue to shape perception on either side, you've lost control of that. And your enemies use that as a weapon against you. So going back and taking that approach alone will not suffice to extract you from your predicament. Likewise, your bureaucracy and the ways that you have built your system and corrupted it prevents a true, authentic middle from rising up, because you are riddled with nepotism, cronyism, and bureaucratic paralysis, as well as institutional arrogance and foolishness. You are a slave to the very things that you have constructed, and they are all working against you. So when I tell you that you need to change your trajectory, I'm not just saying that. I offer ways for you to do that. You're not going to be able to manage your way out of this on either side of the political spectrum. This is bigger than a business problem. This is bigger than an ideological problem. You have a systematic error occurring, and your system is riddled with those errors and fracturing, which is weakening the entirety of the structure across all the 7 spheres of society. You have a lack of vision, and where leaders have a lack of vision, the people perish. Is this not exactly what has been occurring for quite some time? Is this not what has been occurring, denying the impacts of the opiate crisis and all the other drug epidemics that are going on? Is this not what occurs? You've been complicit with corporate greed, which helped facilitate that. You've been complicit with your enemies by not calling it what it is, an act of war. You've been complicit in such a way that now you're culpable in many cases and in many ways for what has occurred to the American people and the country overall and the nation states that are your allies around you. So this is bigger than just blaming another country. And your binary simulacrum with the left and the right, the Democrats always blaming the right, and blaming the Republicans, and the Republicans blaming the left, this will no longer suffice. It will only fuel more problems and exponentially increase the seriousness of your predicament and hasten your fall as a nation. Do you not understand this? Because if you don't understand this, you're not competent enough to be in leadership. If you do understand this and you're ignoring this, then you're corrupt and you're complicit and you're part of the problem and you need to be removed. As I've said before, I never meet anybody who actually believes in this mess anymore. Now that should tell you something. Daily I hear stories from within the government, for the public and the private sectors, of the idiocy, blindness, and absolute foolishness of how your organizations and institutions are being run. So I'm here to tell you, you're running out of time to let go. And those of us that are willing to help you, when you run out of time, we won't be willing to help you, we'll be fighting against you. Not because we want to, but because you have forced our hand. And when we fight against you, we're not just going to fight against you, we're going to fight against all of our enemies. And it will not go well for you. Because pride blinds you to your predicament, and it also blinds you to your vulnerabilities, of which you have innumerable ones, as do our enemies, even your enemies, even the ones that many of you are enslaved to because of being complicit in the past. I'm telling you, you're in a war and you're fighting the wrong one. You're fighting your people. You're fighting those that are willing to help, and that makes you an enemy combatant. It worsens your predicament, your situation. I've lived this for 51 years, ever since I came out of the womb. And I'm here to tell you that before I leave this planet, you will let go of this one way or another. That I know. The only thing that is really up for discussion is what it's going to take for you to do that, and what the consequences are going to be to you. But I can tell you what, those right now are scaling immeasurably. Every single moment you hold on to your power, your wealth, right? Your influence, and think that that's going to fig leaf your situation and help you extract yourself from what you've created. I'm not here for a popularity contest. I really don't give a damn about popularity. I don't live my life by polls and likes and follow me's. But I can tell you, in the end, it's going to be you who's proven wrong in your way, and I will be vindicated and proven right, as I am almost on a daily basis, by telling you what's going to happen, why it's going to happen, how to get out of it, and what the consequences are of ignoring the warnings and doing it the right way. So in your pride and arrogance, you build my credibility and track record and tear your own ones down. So you tear the bridge down with your fakery because you don't want the authentic. And then you wonder why it is your edifice built upon the sand is collapsing. You will let go one way or another. You can do it the hard way, or you can do it the easy way. And if you do it the easy way, you can be a part of the solution to fix things. If you do it the hard way, everything that happens from here on out and everything that's happened that you're already responsible for, you will pay for exponentially. And I guarantee you, you do not have the strength, nor the intellect, nor the courage, nor the spiritual foundations to stand upon to handle that storm. Do you understand? Consider what I'm telling you. Consider your predicament and ask yourself what is more important, your survival or your pride? Because your pride tells you you're gonna have to do it your way to survive, but that's the lie. And you know that because you're ruled by fear and confusion. And fear, being false evidence appearing real, is a lie. You will let go of that one way or another, either while you still have breath in your bodies and a country left, or out of your cold, dead hands when there's no country left and it's replaced. That is your choice. This is a non-negotiable. Just like my perspective on dealing with China. It's unconditional surrender and working to fix the problem. Or your destruction. Those are your options. As it is for people, so too it is for nations and all that people and nations build and construct here in the Shadowlands that we call the temporal.
The authentic and the sophistry of the digitalized reality. The flaccid morbidity of these days is seen in how lies are elevated to the level of truth, and the truth is plundered to fashion the lies which seek to extinguish the very truth it needs to steal to keep itself in existence. In the end, the lies are all exposed by its dependence upon the truth. Thusly the truth will always win because it needs no lie to be true. Which is quite unlike the lie, which cannot be anything on its own without truth itself. The truth is self-evident and self-sustaining without end. Not so with a lie. Confusion among the nations and peoples is a symptom of a greater malady. Pride. Pride is the malicious code injected into the human experience which corrupts all things. Confusion is the function of taking something out of its original intended context and misapplying it in a faulty context. That is precisely what a lie is. A lie is not the absence of truth, but rather a corruption of it by using truth out of its originally intended context and misapplying it in pride wrongly. Thusly the end state as such of a person or a nation which is in the lie become the architects of their own demise, ensuring the truth in the phrase, pride comes before a fall. One cannot be freed from the confusion without first admitting they are confused. Likewise, one cannot be freed from the tyranny of lies and deception without first seeing that they are in fact enslaved to and serving a lie which will ultimately bring them to their destruction.